There's something no one tells Virgo about the beginning of July. It's not about planning. It's not about goals. It's not about doing more, better, faster. It's about something much more specific and much more uncomfortable. It's about the fact that the cycle has already turned inside you, silently. Over the past 2 months, while you were busy organizing, reviewing, and supporting everything around you, something transformed inside without asking permission, without warning, without that dramatic moment that Virgo would expect to feel. And the problem isn't that the change hasn't happened. The problem is that you haven't recognized it yet. This first week of July isn't about starting from scratch. It's about realizing that you've already begun, and that what was built in silence is exactly what this new cycle needed. But there's a specific trap that Virgo is running into right now, a trap so familiar that she doesn't even realize when she falls into it. And it has everything to do with that thing that Virgo does better than any other sign, and which at the same time is the greatest source of paralysis she knows. What happens in this first week will define your entire July. Not because of the calendar, because of a very specific choice that awaits you right now. There's one thing Virgo does better than any other sign, and nobody notices because it just seems like organization. It seems like method. It seems like discipline. But it's nothing like that. It's a very specific way of managing time. Have you ever noticed how, before anything important, there's a ritual? Not a mystical ritual, not a ceremony. It's more subtle than that. It's the list you remake. It's the plan you adjust once more. It's that feeling that, if you revise it a little more, you'll be ready, you'll be sure, you'll be right, and then yes, you begin. But the beginning keeps getting postponed, not out of laziness, not out of obvious fear, because of something Virgo rarely names, the conviction that something is still missing, that the right moment is just one more review away. And July has arrived, not as an invitation, as a presence, like that person who knocks on the door unannounced while you're still in the middle of tidying the house, certain you needed another half hour. July didn't wait. July never waits. But here's what nobody tells Virgo about cycle changes. They don't happen when you feel ready. They happen when the cycle decides it's time, regardless of your internal checklist. And something inside you, something you've probably ignored in recent days because you were too busy organizing, has already felt this change. You've already noticed the air feels different, that certain things that seemed urgent suddenly seem distant, that others, which you've been putting off, have started to hit harder. This is not a distraction, it's the cycle speaking. Virgo has a very particular relationship with time. It's not the relationship of someone who wastes it. It's the relationship of someone who manages it with such precision that they sometimes forget to simply live within it. Virgo's inner laboratory never closes. The lights stay on all night, not because the work isn't finished, but because Virgo fears that the moment they relax their attention, something important will slip through the crack. So she monitors, she calibrates, she adjusts. And that's not a flaw. It's one of the most sophisticated forms of emotional intelligence that exists. But it comes at a cost. The cost is that Virgo rarely declares the experiment finished. Rarely does she look at what's been done and say, "It's ready, it's good, you can go." For the past 2 months, you've been carrying something. Not necessarily a bad weight. Sometimes it was a decision you knew you needed to make but hadn't yet. Sometimes it was a transformation you felt happening inside, but that you didn't tell anyone about because you didn't yet know how to name it. A work of internal reconstruction, of reviewing priorities, of realizing that some things you had been supporting no longer needed your effort, and others, which you had been neglecting, urgently needed it. This work was done behind closed doors. Nobody saw it. Maybe you yourself barely recognized it while it was happening, but it was happening, and it's made it this far. And this is where things get interesting. Because the turning point that July brings for Virgo isn't about what you're going to do from now on. It's about recognizing what you've already done, what you've already built, what you've transformed, silently, methodically, without anyone asking and without anyone applauding. The tide has already turned. Haven't you noticed yet that the current beneath your feet is no longer the same? And now, here's the question that will linger in the air for a moment, because it deserves to. If what has changed has already changed on the inside, what else is stopping you from acknowledging it out loud? This question is not rhetorical. It points to something Virgo has carried for some time, the difficulty of giving credit for what has been done before moving on to the next step. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose is not an astrology manual. It's a tool for inner discernment, something any Virgo instinctively understands they need, but rarely allows themselves to have, because Virgo is an expert at building clarity for others, at seeing the path before anyone else. But when it comes to themselves, to recognizing their own work, to naming what has been transformed, the laboratory falls silent. This book comes in exactly there, not to give ready-made answers, to help you ask the right questions about the moment you are in. You are in that moment right now, with the discomfort still active, with the cycle turning, with July knocking on the door, and you're still trying to decide if you're ready enough. This is the time to act, not later. Now. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, what have you built in the last 2 months that you haven't yet recognized as an achievement? I want to read about it. There's a pattern that Virgo repeats without realizing it. She reaches the threshold of something important, a decision, a surrender, a turning point, and then stops, not out of indecision, out of excessive awareness, out of seeing so clearly what could go wrong that she forgets to see what is already right. Imagine a musician tuning their instrument before going on stage. Once, twice, 3 times. By the 4th time, they know the instrument is perfect. But they tune it again because tuning has become a way of not starting to play, of remaining in the safe space of preparation, where it's not yet possible to make mistakes because it's not yet time to really play. Virgo knows this space very well and has a complicated relationship with it because, on the one hand, it's where she feels most competent, most in control, most herself. On the other hand, at some point in life, she begins to realize that she never pressed the start button because she was waiting for the tuning to tell her it was time. Tuning never tells you when it's time. You're the one who decides. And what this first week of July is asking of Virgo, in a very specific, very surgical way, is precisely this decision. Not a change of personality, not abandoning the method or analysis that defines it, but the ability to look at the instrument and say, it's good enough. You can play. July arrived with a kind of gentle but constant pressure, not the kind of pressure that breaks, the kind that molds, like water that encounters a stone and doesn't try to destroy it, but simply finds its way around it. This week has that character. It won't force Virgo to be different from who she is. It will create the conditions for Virgo to be more herself than she has been in recent months, without the armor of constant preparation, without the shield of the endless checklist that kept her safe and still at the same time. The real turning point isn't when the calendar changes, it's when something inside you gives way, not in a bad way, the way a knot gives when it's finally untied, when the tension you've been holding for weeks, sometimes months, simply dissolves because the time to act has finally come and there's no point in resisting anymore. This moment is approaching for Virgo this week, and what will define how you navigate it is not how much you've prepared, but whether you can recognize that the preparation you've already put in is sufficient. There is a subtle but fundamental difference between a surgeon who is still sterilizing instruments and one who is already ready for the operation. Outwardly, the movements seem the same. Inwardly, the difference is total. One is in the ritual of preparation. The other is focused on what matters. July is asking Virgo to make this transition, not from one state to another, but from one posture to another, from the posture of one who prepares to the posture of one who acts. This realization that you've been waiting for a guarantee that will never come is one of the most liberating and most frightening there is, because it leaves no room for procrastination. And it is precisely for this moment that the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose was written. For Virgos who already know what they need to do but remain trapped in the endless cycle of checking, for the analytical intelligence that has become its own trap. This book won't tell you to stop analyzing. It will show you how to use that same clarity to finally move forward. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. What will be tested this week for Virgos isn't competence. You already have plenty of that. What will be tested is your ability to trust your own competence without seeking external confirmation. Virgo has a rare gift. She sees what needs to be done before anyone else, like a navigator who has memorized every detail of the route so carefully that he could navigate it with his eyes closed. He knows where the reefs are. He knows the depth at each point. He knows how the wind behaves at that time of year, and yet, when it's time to cast off the moorings, he hesitates. Not because the route is uncertain, because he is waiting for the wind to be exactly the same as the day he practiced. But the wind is never exactly the same. No real crossing happens under laboratory conditions, and the experienced navigator, the navigator who really knows what he's doing, doesn't need perfect wind. He needs enough skill to work with the wind he has. This week, the wind will be at a different level than expected. It always is, in any real turning point. The question isn't whether the conditions are perfect. It's whether you trust enough in what you've learned to let go anyway. And here's what Virgo rarely admits. She's let go before. In moments that seemed impossible, she moved. She did what needed to be done with what she had available at that moment, and it worked. Not because the conditions were ideal, but because Virgo, when she truly decides, is ruthless in its execution. This week calls for this virgin, the one who decides. But there's a new element that July brings that's important to name. Because it's not just about making decisions that were pending, it's about the type of decision that's at stake now. In recent cycles, Virgo's decisions have largely been about maintenance, about sustaining what already existed, about correcting what was misaligned, about being the stabilizing force that things around needed. And Virgo fulfilled this role with its usual competence. July is calling for something different. It's calling for creation, not maintenance, expansion, not correction. And this places Virgo in territory that, however well she knows the theory, is less familiar in practice. Because creating from scratch, by choice, without a specific problem to solve, requires a different relationship with uncertainty. And Virgo and uncertainty have a long and complicated history. Virgo resolves uncertainty by analyzing it, breaking it down into smaller parts, studying each component until the unknown becomes known. It's a brilliant strategy, and it works most of the time. But there is a type of uncertainty that cannot be resolved through analysis. It is creative uncertainty. The not knowing that comes before any genuine work, the empty space before the first line. And it is in this space that July places Virgo this week, not to scare her, to reveal what she hasn't yet discovered about herself. There's something very particular about Virgo's gift of seeing things before others, and also a specific trap that comes with it. Confusing clarity with certainty, thinking they can only act when they know with absolute precision what will happen. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose works precisely on this distinction. It shows how to transform Virgo's analytical capacity into a compass for movement, not a reason to stand still. For Virgo, who already sees the path but is still holding back the first step. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is a capacity that Virgo has developed throughout her life, and she has never called it by its correct name. She calls it critical thinking. She calls it self-awareness. She calls it a sense of responsibility. But the real name is vision. Virgo sees what is wrong, what can be improved, what is not yet in its place, with a precision that most people will never achieve. It is an extraordinary gift. And it is also the reason why Virgo spends a good part of their life reforming, fixing what belongs to others, adjusting what is around them, improving what already existed. Not because they are selfish. On the contrary, Virgos do this because they clearly see what can be improved, and they can't simply ignore that perception. For Virgos, seeing what can be corrected and not acting is almost a form of dishonesty. It's an internal tension they constantly carry, but this week that gift will be called upon in a different way. Not to reform, to create. An architect who has spent their entire career designing renovations knows everything about structure. They know what can be removed without the rest collapsing. They know where the load-bearing walls are, where the stress points are, where the space breathes and where it suffocates. This knowledge is profound and real. But designing his own house from scratch with nothing existing to renovate is a different challenge, because now he will need to choose not what is right to fix, but what he wants, what makes sense for the life he has, not for the structure he inherited. This is the most delicate aspect of Virgo's gift. She knows how to do what is right. She rarely stops to ask what is hers. And July, in this first week, will put this question at the center, not in an invasive way. It's not the kind of question that comes shouting. It's the kind that appears in quiet moments. When you're in the middle of a task and suddenly realize you're solving someone's problem who didn't ask for your help. When you look at your schedule and realize it's full of things you do well but never really chose. This is not a criticism. It's an invitation. There's something Virgo needs to hear right now. Not because they don't know, because they do, but rarely stop to let it in. What you call inadequacy is often simply the high standard you've set for yourself. The yardstick you use to measure your own work has been calibrated to a level that few people around you can even see. And when you measure yourself by that yardstick and decide you haven't reached it, you're not being honest, you're being unfair. July isn't asking Virgo to drop everything and reinvent themselves. It's asking for something much more precise, that you reserve a space, even a small one, for what is genuinely yours. For the project that only you know exists. For the intention you never verbalized because it seemed premature or presumptuous or too big for the moment. The time, Virgo, is now. Choosing what is yours, not just what is right. That is one of the most profound achievements any Virgo can make. And it rarely happens by accident. It requires a kind of self-knowledge that goes beyond analysis, beyond self-criticism, beyond the constant refinement that Virgo so masters. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose is an invitation to this encounter. For Virgo to stop being the architect of other people's lives and start designing with the same precision and care their own. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. July doesn't begin when the calendar turns, not for Virgo. July begins the moment you stop reviewing and start moving. The moment you look at what has been built over the past few months, quietly, methodically, sometimes without even realizing it, and decide that it's enough to take the next step. There's a clock that Virgo always kept running with absolute perfection, an impeccable mechanism, carefully calibrated that never lost a second. The only detail is that she never set it for her own time, always for the time of obligations, of expectations, of what she should be, of what others needed her to be. This week, you have the chance to adjust your schedule, not the perfect time, your time. And here's what few people talk about regarding Virgo and the turning of cycles. They often underestimate how much they've changed between one cycle and another. Because Virgo doesn't change dramatically. There are no big ruptures, big announcements, big visible transformations. Virgo's change happens in layers, through refinement, through a process so gradual and so internal that when they finally look back, the distance traveled surprises them, sometimes even scares them because they didn't realize they were moving. You are in this moment now, looking back, even if reluctantly, and realizing that you're not in the same place you were in May, that certain things that seemed impossible are no longer so, that certain certainties you carried have already dissolved, that certain questions that scared you now seem just questions without the weight they once had. That's growth. And Virgo growth rarely makes a sound. Virgo arrived in July carrying more than it seems, more transformation than it admits, more clarity than it recognizes, more preparation than it believes. And the strange beauty of this moment is that all of this doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to be reviewed yet again before being used. It's already in you. It already was. And when July truly begins, when you decide it has begun, it will become clear that the work done in silence was exactly the work this cycle demanded. No more, no less, exactly what was needed. This is the gift that Virgo possesses and rarely allows herself to acknowledge, the precision of what she builds from within, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. May this week be the moment when you look at that precision and finally decide that it's enough to get started.